I think we are live and hopefully without any technical difficulties. I believe everybody out there can hear me. I hope so, which would mean that we are doing well. So, welcome everybody to LitBox, the show where we shine a light on the writing side of the entertainment industry. Um, with my co-host and I'm Charlie Oso, my co-host Zach Quinones. We bring you the show through both of our companies, Lowriders, which if you want to say a few words about what Lowriders is, you can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, it's basically just a writing lab. Obviously, right now it's all done online, but we would do basically work with just writers if you have a project or a new project that you want to start. We can help make it as good as possible. That's like really the gist of it. If you want to go to the website, lowriders.inc, LOWRITERS.INK, as in pen ink. It gives you a lot more details on what we do and how we can help you. First 30 days is free, so you don't have to worry about paying anything. And even right now, we're doing a lot of free stuff for people because everybody is out of work. So,
Unfortunately, that is
yeah.
the times at the moment. And then there is also culturenerd.com, which is an up and coming site devoted to all things nerdy, including, of course, entertainment, just like this. But we also hope to include some things that will inform and educate. The idea behind the site is to make you feel welcome in the things that you enjoy and not necessarily or to actually avoid the alienation that oftentimes comes with the nerd culture that I have personally come across a lot of in my pursuit of all things nerdy. So, moving on from there, today's episode is Where's My Money? Literally, it is about making money in the writing industry, specifically writing for the entertainment industry. And A, what does that look like? And hopefully, B, whenever it happens to you, what does that feel like? So I'm going to be handing today's episode over mostly to Zach, who has a little more knowledge of this area and will be able to kind of shed a little bit more light as he is currently in LA doing this, making money doing this. So we're gonna we're gonna go ahead and get started with today's episode. So I hope that you enjoy it, and yeah, let's go ahead and let's get started.
Cool. So this is like a topic that it could probably be like a 5 hour episode if you really want to get in all the semantics of it. But I'll try to like hit a lot of key points. And obviously, if you have more questions, you can definitely like ask questions in the comments on YouTube. You can email us or however you want to reach out to us. You can ask more questions and get more clarity and information on certain things that we bring up. Uh, Probably the main thing is, I guess, like there's two different things when it comes to making money on when it comes to writing. There's somebody who makes a living writing, where they can basically just earn all of their money or all of their income from writing. And then there's people who get paid to write, but they're not necessarily earning all of their income from that. About 95% of writers are in that latter part where they can make money writing, but for most of the time they have some sort of other side gig or a day job or other type of like income stream. It's really, 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 really difficult to it's really difficult to make a living off writing just purely doing that. And it's just as hard to even just get paid to write. Writing's a thing. Somebody had put it really people want the Sistine Chapel for $5. Essentially, that's like they want you to, if especially with screenwriting, I'm going to kind of focus on that. They want you to write the next blockbuster hit that's going to make them millions of dollars, but they usually don't want to pay you for it, or they want to pay you very little for it. Uh, so, and a lot of times people, it's really weird. Because like the first time I got like paid for screenwriting, I got a $5,000 check, and then I haven't. When I got that, it kind of makes you think, oh man, $5,000. This is what this is going to be the thing that's going to be consistent. I'm just gonna every time I write a screenplay. By the way, is really really low for a screenplay,
Yeah, but I
and
mean, and for sure, like for a lot of the writers who are going to be watching this, who are making 10 cents a word or whatever they're doing for writing articles, they have their creative writing degrees, and all they're doing
yeah,
currently, unfortunately, is writing articles. $5,000 compared to uh, $50 or $500, whatever they're making for that article, depending on the word count. That does
yeah,
that does sound like that does sound like a lot, and that sounds like, oh yeah, like payday. That's
yeah,
nice.
yeah. And you kind of when you get that first check or whatever, regardless of how big it is, you are it's natural for you to think like this is going to be a consistent thing because if I get paid 5,000, the next job that I get, but I haven't gotten that so far has been the biggest check I've ever gotten or the most I've ever made on just one single kind of screenplay. I've made a couple thousand for one, 3,000 for this one, a few hundred for that one. And then, of course, there's plenty where I've worked on screenplays for free for friends or for people that, um, friends of a friend that they kind of vouched for. So there's a lot of that in between as well. And so you have to like pick and choose. And it's a very like, it's like I said earlier, it's like a 5 hour discussion.
Yeah,
So, because there's so many, it's a labyrinth of things and it's so complicated. But essentially, I'll break it down like this, and we're going to focus on screenwriting. You have to differentiate between collaboration and a job. A
mhm,
collaboration, money's not really the focus. You're doing it because it's more of a passion project type thing, or you meet somebody that you connect really well creatively, and you're like, let's work on a project together. And they may be a producer, they may be a director, a combination of both, and you collaborate and you work on the script and you're not thinking about money, you're not worried about being paid or whatever, but there is sort of like an end game to where we're going to get this made and hopefully we can make some money off of it. And that
yeah,
is like a very level playing field because everybody's essentially working for free. And in those cases, your focus should really be on the creative aspect of it, putting something out that's really good, and making money is sort of like the bonus of it. And if you get to that stage, you have to have the conversation early of like, hey, if we end up making money off of this, which there are many ways you can make money now from films, how do we split it? Just having even those conversations on a basic level, if that opportunity comes where you're going to start making money off of this thing, it's not going to be super uncomfortable or like a blind side of like, oh well, we made $1,000 off streaming, so how are we going to, if you had that conversation early, that's always a good thing to have, and that's really a big part of making money as a writer is talking about money early on. So
yeah,
many people put that off. And when it comes time, next thing you know, you're 3 months into a project and you're like, I don't have time for this anymore. Like, I don't have, the resources financially, mentally, or whatever. And that's how a lot of projects usually fall to the wayside or kind of come apart at the seams is because people start saying, well, I need to get paid because I've been working on this for 2 months, 3 months, and I'm not getting paid for it. And that becomes an uncomfortable conversation or a triggering conversation, however you want to put it. So you have to really put money on the table early, even if it's just like, even if I've had producers to be like, I have no money. So if you don't want to do it, like it's fine. And half the time, like, yeah, I'm good. Or half the time, I'm like, you know what, I'll do it because it's like you're being upfront with me, and I understand like it's a level playing field.
mhm,
And I, as a writer, you also have to establish your own boundaries too.
And
you know, because
I was gonna actually ask about that.
yeah,
If you don't mind me interjecting for just a second. So
go ahead. Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, like whenever you were talking about doing a project for a friend or doing a project for a friend of a friend who
Hmm.
your friend vouches for, um, you know, there's always that cautionary tale of, don't do too much for free. And I don't know, is there some advice that you can kind of give people who are stuck in that loop of, I'm collaborating, I'm networking, and they're not seeing any money coming in. They're not seeing any stream of productivity really, except for what they put out, and nothing's
Hmm.
really coming back. So, is there any advice that you could give somebody for that?
I mean, honestly, stop doing it. That's really the best advice is just to stop doing it and start really working, like give that time to some personal projects.
So,
Uh,
I guess my question more is, where do you draw where do you draw the line? When do you find that boundary, of saying no, it's not worth it, or
yeah, there's a lot of metrics to it. I would say my personal metric is when the enjoyment of writing starts getting sucked out of me. So I can keep going and doing stuff for free if I'm really enjoying it and I'm getting because there's also the concept of income is monetary and creative. So your income can be monetary or it can be creatively. So if you're doing something that's kind of pushing you creatively and making you a better writer, that might be worth a little bit more than getting $1,000 check to do that project or another project. And as I've gone forward and have made money here with these little projects here, there's been many times where I'm like, this wasn't worth the money working on.
Yeah.
The producer was shit, the end product was shit, and the money didn't justify it. And so, I'm definitely not like an anti-free or tell people be like, fuck you, pay me type of thing.
Hmm.
That comes later when they do owe you money and and they don't want to pay you.
Yeah.
But money is definitely like a talk up front, and it's like you said, like when do you kind of stop, or where's the boundary of when you stop doing like stuff for friends and friends of a friends. My personal metric again, like I said, was when I the enjoyment is out of it. Another metric is if you're trying to squeeze it in, like it shouldn't be something that you make room for. Like even if it's for a friend or a friend of a friend, you should have that time available to. It's like the stock market. It's like money you can put in that you're not worried about getting back.
Yeah.
And so it's time that you can give away that you're not too concerned with getting back necessarily creatively or financially. Another one is again like how how much is it taking away from your own projects, because as much as it's great to work with other people and collaborate, the real productivity and progress as a writer is the stuff you work on in the training field, is
Yeah.
what I call it. It's like an athlete. You can go and have practice with your teammates and go to games, but it's what you do in your backyard at home that makes the difference. And so that can I've had moments like that where it's just like I'm working on this person's project, this person's project and that, and my skill level becomes very stagnant, and I can't when I do try to write anything for myself or for another project that requires a little bit more creativity, I can't really produce, because it's just like a weird thing. You just become stagnant.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure out what your kind of like limit is, and that's going to take trial and error. But in my experience, usually it's when you have no time for your own writing, when it does actually hinder you financially, because there's people that they can't pay the rent, or they're behind on whatever, and it's because they're doing too much stuff free. So that's another one. It takes the joy out of everything. And I think there's like there was one other one I forgot, but that's
Okay.
kind of like a general bundle to kind of go off of.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point for sure, because we feel like when we're writing, like you said, we're trying to collaborate, we're trying to network, but so much we can get so lost in the networking aspect of trying to make it that we're not looking out for ourselves anymore, and that is a place that we definitely don't want to be in. And
Hmm.
so you make some really, I think those are really good points to follow whenever you're thinking about a, am I enjoying this as much as I should? Is the networking really worth it at this point? And then B, how far am I really stretching myself?
Hmm.
And do I actually have time and the willpower to push through this? Because that's another thing is, I guess, you don't want to get started on a project where you're collaborating with somebody and then lose your wind, in
Hmm.
the middle of that ocean of writing, because then that makes you look bad. For one,
Hmm.
when you drop out of a project because you just can't do it anymore because you said that you could, and all of a sudden you're having to backtrack and say, well, no, I realize I pushed myself too thin. And in the aspect of networking, that's a big no. You don't want to do
Hmm.
that. So
Yeah. Especially if you're starting out, you don't really have the equity to do that.
yeah.
Like I'm lucky enough to where I'm like I always call myself like a nobody with equity. Like I'm essentially like a nobody writer, but I have a portfolio enough to where I can like there's the thing that a lot of people don't realize with freelancing is a lot of people are out there to get a job and to convince the client that they're worth hiring, but you also have to have the client convince you that they're worth working with. And you obviously can't really do that early on when you're still trying to perfect your craft and be better. And I'm still always trying to be better than I was like a year ago. But I've reached the point where I have enough portfolio and stock or equity or however you want to call it that I can fire clients. Like there's been times where I've told clients like I don't want to work with you because you suck, like I've been that blunt before.
Yeah.
And to me it's like go ahead and say whatever you want because if people for one they may look at my portfolio because of how badly you speak of me, and then they look at my portfolio and they're like, "Oh, this guy's really good." It was probably a problem with the other person because I have enough. I've had so many different clients that it's just sort of like my work speaks for itself in most cases.
Yeah.
And so, but you have to get to that point. And when you get to that point, obviously, it's not that doesn't mean every bad client that you work with, you give them the middle finger. You have to look at everything situation by situation.
You got to
So
develop that equity, like you said. You can't just
yeah,
be like,
yeah,
you can't walk into LA and be like, nah, not working for you, not working for you,
yeah,
f you, you're cool. It doesn't work that way.
yeah, exactly. And so, because you do got to carry a bit of self-respect and a little bit of pride with you as well.
Yeah.
Uh, and if if you develop the habit of letting people walk all over you, it's going to be that's going to make it even harder to make money and to get money from this business and from your craft.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to like getting a project, so like if you meet a client, right? Uh, the first thing is if they're not friend of a friend, they're a client. You have to like embed that in your head. And if they're like, I want to work on a project, I have this idea for a script. Don't hesitate to ask them, do you have a budget? Do you have a budget for writing? Do you have anything for writing? Do you have anything? And oh, most of the time it's going to be no, or I don't really have much money, blah, blah, blah. And that's when you kind of have to get into the nitty gritty of it, of really asking a lot of questions. Like, what is it exactly you're looking for? Are you looking for a first draft? Are you looking for a final draft, like a first draft, second draft revisions? How long do you want to do this? Like, what's the dynamics of the situation? Because I've had people be like, I don't have any money, like I don't have a budget or anything. So, all right, like, what are you looking for? I just need one draft, and it can be done, in a year. Like, take your time, whatever. As long as you get something done every couple weeks, like we're good. I'd be
Hmm.
like, sure, I'll do that. You don't have to pay me anything, and then when we're done, we can talk. We can, talk about more logistics of like, who owns the rights, who owns this, what happens if you sell it, what happens if you bring on another writer to do a rewrite. Like these are all things that are very important, and they can earn you money or they cannot earn you money, but they can also protect you because a lot of times that kind of gets into a whole other thing where when people think about LA or Hollywood or the entertainment business and people's ideas getting stolen. Nobody really steals ideas, they steal the product. There's been a lot of writers who I know who wrote a first draft for somebody for free, and it was really easy, really fun. And then they find out through the grapevine that this person fucking took their name off, put their name on top of it, and like brought somebody else to do a rewrite and do this. And so that's usually how the theft happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of stuff like that, if you don't have these conversations with people about your own protections and stuff, if that person were to sell the script, like you would never know,
Yeah.
and you're out of it. And so there's a whole lot of things like example. Like here's a really good example based off that. If you write a script for free and they just want a first draft, and you tell them, okay, if you're not paying me, if that's totally fine, but I own all the rights. And they're gonna be like, well, it's like, no, like, what do I get out of this? Like, especially if this is somebody that's not a friend or a friend of a friend. I'm not getting anything out of this. Like, because everybody in LA thinks they're writing fucking Citizen Kane. Like every producer and director that comes to you, they think they're gonna make Citizen Kane, and they think like you're getting this sort of like creative orgasm working on their thing, and you're not. Like they can be fun. You can have a fun time working on it, but you're not really getting anything out of it. That's the reality of it. And the other reality is most stuff doesn't get made, and then the stuff that does get made ends up being a little bit below average to garbage. And that's just the reality. And unless it's you that's like taking the script, like your own script, and making it the way you want, most of the time when you see stuff, it's not something you're super proud of or super like hyped about. And so when you do a project like that for free and it's a client, you own the rights, and you establish that really quick. That is your stock, that is your equity. And if they want the rights for you, they can pay for it. And then you set your price. And if they try to sell it, even if they do sell it and scheme and convince a production company to buy it, convincing them they own the rights,
Mm-hmm.
a production company will do a pretty good job of confirming that they have the rights. And if they don't, if they're just trying to be really quick about it, if that thing goes off and gets sold to Netflix and becomes a Netflix series, I mean, you basically just made money doing nothing
Yeah.
because you own the rights to it and you can take them to court and it's a pretty done deal. The other thing is too, if you do something for free and you're like, I own the rights, and if you bring on another writer to write on this, you have to pay me. So it's like because you're basically encroaching on my real estate.
And that's good to that's good advice for new writers as well, in that you want to establish those things up front. A, because you want to have the protection. B, it also is you kind of standing your ground and making the people that you're about to work with realize that, oh shit, this guy knows what he's talking about. So maybe, you know, maybe we should really consider him. Whereas I have had a lot, I won't say a lot, but I've had, before I even considered getting my degree in creative writing, we all did the indie thing. We all tried, to work with local production companies and things like that. And I will say that there were a couple of times where I went into a job and tried to work with somebody, and I was like, oh, I was like real easygoing. Like, oh,
Mm.
don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Oh yeah, it's cool that we get to work together. Like just trying to like schmooze and whatnot. And I didn't have a job within like a week, basically because they realized that I had no idea what the hell I was doing, you know?
Uh,
And I mean, it was true. And they don't want somebody who is insecure or who doesn't know what they're doing on their project, because then that makes them feel insecure with the product that you're creating, you
mhm.
know? And so you definitely want to put that first strong foot forward and say, I'm here. I know what I'm doing. Let's get to work and let's do this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a win-win because you're going to scare away the people who aren't approaching it with the best intentions, and the people who are legitimate and looking for the best intentions are going to stick around, and like you said, they're going to be like, oh, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, or
Yeah.
has at least some sense of idea of it. Um, Especially like kind of like going with that is like there's a lot of ways to make money as a screenwriter without, like I said, owning the rights is a big thing. Um, Telling people like if you bring another rider, like you have to pay me to allow them to ride. The other thing is too, if you are getting paid, to protect yourself to make sure you get paid. 'Cause a lot of people do that. They'll be like, "Oh, I'll give you $4,000 to write the script." Cool. You start writing it 2 months in, you finish, and you never get paid.
Yeah.
It's easy to just fucking throw a number in there. I could probably, if I really wanted to, I can go on Instagram, hashtag screenwriter LA, go on there, find a guy who's like a month into living in LA, reach out to him, and then fucking scam him like that. It's really easy. Oh, $5,000. Look at my portfolio. Like,
Yeah.
and it's very very common. If
Oh,
somebody
I
if
hope you made
somebody
some people feel like really sleazy right now because like there are people who do that shit. So hopefully somebody watching this is like, damn, I feel ashamed right now.
yeah yeah, and so the other thing is like if somebody's actually like, oh, this is how much I'll pay you or whatever. There's two ways you can go about it. One is ask a deposit, super easy, and usually deposit 10% of whatever it is. Uh, if they're gonna pay you $2,500, be like, cool. I do a 10% deposit, so $250. Um, Another way is like, okay, like cool, you're gonna pay me 2,500. Like the thing is, too, people say like, oh, I'll give you 2,500 or whatever, and it's deferred.
Hmm.
That's a lot of people don't understand what that means. They just think, oh, you're gonna pay me when I'm done. Deferred pays means I'll just pay you when I can. So it's just like coded language to be like, I'm not gonna pay you probably
Yeah,
ever.
exactly. I'm not gonna pay you. That's
So if it's deferred pay, I've had that before. I'm like, just tell me you're not gonna pay me.
yeah.
Like I maybe not be that blunt, but I'll just be like, if they're really adamant or you want to take a chance, because a lot of these jobs, if you start getting jobs, they're calculated
Hmm.
risks. If somebody is saying deferred pay, just say, okay, deferred pay within 30 days of the final of completion of project.
So put a timestamp on it for yourself.
Yeah. And if you don't, you can take them to small claims court or you can add fees to it. There's a lot of things that you can do that will scare away people who are going to scam you or rip you off.
Okay.
Uh, Usually, people who are willing to pay, most of the time, in my experience, want to pay you as quickly as possible or start paying you in the early stages, whether it's the deposit or something. Another thing you can do is, payments are always negotiable and they're always flexible. A lot of times, there people that I've had where they're like, oh, I don't really have a budget or whatever. Just talking to them, getting down to know them a little better, you could be like, well, what we can do is we can set like hours that I work on it per week, working it a couple hours this week, work on it a couple hours, charge you $20 an hour. And then, you know, you can kind of dictate the flow of money. So people can be like, when they think of it like that, especially like a client, they're like, oh, 2 hours a week, that's $40. That's $160 a month. I could do that, you know?
Yeah.
Cool. And then some of those some of them they end up paying me like $3,000 because it lasts like a year or whatever. And so, that's another way like where you can actually kind of make it work for you. Because a lot of times when people are like, "Oh, I don't have that much money. Maybe the most I can pay you is like 500."
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh, I can't do it." Blah blah blah. But you're like, "Okay, well, how about we do this? How about we do that? Like, would this work for you?" Blah blah blah. Blah. And the great thing about that is when you work in sort of like payment installments,
Hmm.
is let's say you tell somebody pay me every 2 weeks, and as long as I hit certain milestones, like I turn in every 10 pages every 2 weeks, you pay me. That's the fair trade. If they don't pay you, just stop working on it, and you worked maybe 20 pages on it or 30 pages.
Yeah.
So your loss isn't that great as much as if you just waited till the very end to ask them for money or to realize, oh, they're not going to pay you. So you have to look at it in sort of like, what can I do to set myself up that if things are not legitimate and then this person's scheming, that I'll know early in the process and I can back out and not waste several weeks or months of my life.
Yeah. I mean, so with that mindset, then can we just go ahead and shed some light on Hollywood as a whole and just say that? I mean, from what you're telling me, what it sounds like is nobody has any fucking money in Hollywood. Like, if
Yeah,
I mean, if you're having to go all these roundabout ways to ensure yourself and make sure that you're not getting screwed over in the end, to make sure that you're actually getting money,
yeah,
because at the beginning of this, you kind of mentioned that you were like, well, they want you to work for free. Everybody is trying to get you to work for free. And
hmm
so, I mean, essentially, why is that, right?
yeah,
And I guess, for me, and I'm sure you'd be able to tell me more about this for sure, but from an outsider looking in, it sounds like nobody has money. Like it's all a trickle effect. And
hmm
the person that has the key for the gate up top for the money to actually come down is going to wait until the finished product is made, and everybody's pushing for that finished product, but you need to get it to the gatekeeper before you're going to see anything, right?
yeah. That's one aspect of it. That's definitely like very very on the mark. Um, and that's sort of the thing too. Is like, yeah, like nobody has money, and I think a big part of it also is I think generally, like I'll say that like pretty much everything I've worked on, like I've done for myself. Any project that I was like a producer on, and it was like my passion project, with the exception of like friends of mine that were like they're just my crew. Everybody has their crew that you all get together once a year and you work on a project. But
Hmm.
even them, I pretty much pay everybody.
Yeah.
There's very few people, like there's friends of mine that are like they're just part of my team. I do stuff for them, they do stuff for me, and we've established that over the years. But it's just sort of like I've had so many situations where I'll tell an actor like, okay, like, it's $100 for the day, and I'll pay you the day of. And I always get the same reactions like, oh shit, so I don't have to chase you down like everybody else. And so that's like a very telling sign. And it's like I heard
Yeah.
that 9 years ago and I still hear it today.
Damn.
And there's an actor that I work with, and he's been on like two or three of my projects, but he basically like he'll come in for a day, and I'll pay him $100. And yeah, I mean he's reached the point with me where by the third project, he just doesn't even really. It's just like he's just like, oh yeah, is it just 100 for the day? And then I'm just like, yeah. And he's like, cool. And then like that's it, because there's such an established trust. Like he knows like I'm gonna pay him, and then if I tell him it's gonna be a week, it's gonna be a week. I don't
Hmm.
say it's gonna be a week, and then a month later he's like calling me, asking me, hey, what's
Yeah.
going on with this? But it
I
is
feel like
it is part, huh?
I feel like that's part of our roots, though. Like where Texas, also down south in
Mm,
the valley, you work and you
yeah,
you pay for the work that you're going to do. You know what I mean? And you make
yeah,
sure that you're going to pay for it, because it's not fun to have that kind of like debt over your head.
yeah,
And so I'm glad you carried that over with you to Hollywood. That's
yeah.
good. Maybe it'll catch on. That'd be great.
Maybe. Yeah, and so like, yeah, it's one of those things. Not every, people. There's like no money, but also people don't want to put in the effort to make the money happen. I had a friend. I mean, I've had people that thankfully had paid me money to do like write short films, and even a lot of the short films don't even get made
Hmm.
because they just don't. But I've had people be like, "I'll give you $150. Like, I'll pay you what I can pay you." And
Yeah.
to me, that goes a long way. I've had people that have been like, I've worked on free stuff for them for like feature length scripts, and it's established free, whatever. And then I've had them after the fact when I'm like getting close to done to be like, hey, here's like $200. Like, this is all I have like to like give you, but I'm just like so appreciative of the work you've done, and how professional you've been and all that.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
cool.
why I always say it's a calculated thing whenever you approach these projects.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, working for those free projects, you work on things that you want to work on, because if you're not getting paid, it has to at least give you something back, and being able to work on something creatively that's at least letting you practice and hone your skill, that's good. So in the end, whenever you finally do get paid, I think that that also shows your dedication. I mean, you personally. This is me talking
Hmm.
just to you, not necessarily to the audience, but and hopefully that they can take that example and go with it. Also, that when you work on something creatively that inspires you, that makes you happy to actually work on it, you tend to do better work. And when you do better work, you tend to hold yourself accountable and make sure that the work actually gets done. And when people start to see that, that's when the networking gets good. And
Hmm.
that's when people say, hey, you know what, I worked with this person and they did a really good job. You need a script done, let me give you their number. And then boom, you're starting to
Hmm.
actually get more calls and getting more jobs that hopefully, you know, in the grand scheme of things, if you ratio it out right, at least some of them have to get paid for
Yeah.
paying gigs.
No, yeah, that's a really good example. That's my friend. She's a producer, and it's like a good balance of that. Like she's kind of mastered the art of networking
Hmm.
to that degree where it's like the free producing job she did here got her like a paid gig here. And it's just sort of that thing where it's just sort of like the discipline and the work ethic and she's a little bit more I guess you could say like I don't want to say forgiving, tolerable than I am. So she'll
Hmm.
tend to stick it out with like really shitty producer, like other producers and projects more so
Yeah.
than I will. And those have but she's a producer, so she's working with a lot more people. So those tend to benefit her more. As a writer, you're usually working with one other person, which is like the producer, director, maybe a second producer on it.
Hmm.
So it's not sticking those out doesn't really benefit you as much because if you hate the one person that you're working with or don't really like them, what are you getting out of it? As opposed to somebody like a producer who has actors and director and all these other people, they can network with those as well. And that's the other thing. We brought up networking is people are really good at networking, but the working part is not something they're very good at. And so it's just like I just know so many people that have the greatest networks ever, and then they have the most bare vacant portfolio you could find.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I think that was a really good point that you brought up, where it's like you have to actually get, they call it like get in the room, and you have to get in the room, and you have to actually work and produce results to some extent, even if those results are just this person was amazing to work with, they exceeded my expectations.
And that brings me to another point that I kind of wanted to bring up to the audience as well is I hope that this will change over time. I don't know, with the way that the world is right now and COVID and people working more remotely and things like that. I'm hoping to see an evolution in this. But a conversation that you and I had a while back was about like, do you think that if you had not moved to LA, that you would be receiving the work that you're getting now? And your answer to me at the time was no. You had to actually get there. You had to network. You had to meet people in order to actually get the jobs. You could not have done what you're doing now without actually moving there to do that. And that has always been something to me that I've just absolutely hated about the industry, because especially as writers, like we should, being able to write is one thing. Yes, being on a lot where you can go to the studio in the morning and go shoot and things like that, being on location, those kinds of things, yes, you have to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But on the writing side of things, it really is harder to justify that when you know that you can create a story just as well at home, somewhere all the way across the states as you can in LA. But I know that when I first started my journey into, getting my creative writing degree, um, that was one of the things that almost actually made me kind of turn around and almost walk away from the program. Was it was like my second class in in the degree program, and I remember specifically they were talking about basically, making sure that you get to the party.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, it, did this professor really just say that? Like, that's the important thing about writing. That's the important thing about the industry, is making sure that you get to the party, making sure that you make the appearance.
Yeah.
And it bugged me so much that I ended up even having to write him an email and just say, like, I know what you're saying. I said, but is this really what it takes? Because if it is, like, I just don't know if I really want to continue on with this. I'm not that kind of person.
Hmm.
You know, I don't get me wrong. Like, I would, whenever I was younger, I would love to have, go to whatever party was there, right?
Yeah.
But I went there for an entirely different reason. It wasn't to schmooze people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I went to parties, but I was also an introvert. I was the person in the corner watching everybody else just because that was fun to me. I was collecting stories at parties is what I was doing. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so having to be that person where you kind of have to exert yourself and actually meet people, that just threw me off completely.
Hmm.
But I want to share with our audience. I want to share with our people that this is a real thing. This is something that you have to do. Networking is a very big part of the entertainment industry, and if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to put that foot forward, maybe you really need to think about whether or not this career is really for you, because unless you're going to be a novelist who you can write at home and you can have your publisher look at your stuff, and that's the only interaction you have. If you're looking at writing and creating scripts, it's a collaborative effort, and if you're not willing to make that effort to work collaboratively with people, you're not going to make it in the industry. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good segue into when it comes to the business aspect of film and the industry is you can in some way like have the sort of novel approach where you just sit in your room, you write stuff, you shoot stuff on your own camera, you maybe have a few actors and you can do that. And there's one person that I know who fucking basically did that and made a career out of it, which was the guy who did Lights Out.
Hmm.
That's basically what he was doing with his wife, and but even then he did it for a long fucking time. And there's a good interview with him where when he talked to that he had to go to Hollywood and network, and he said it was the most fucking nerve wracking. I don't want to do this thing. Like this is not like what I signed up for.
Yeah.
And he got through it. He got through it. He everything like that. But that's one person out of however many people out there. So
Well,
it's like, and even then, he had to network. He
yeah.
had to do it. He couldn't. It wasn't like they just threw him a bunch of money and said, "Hey, make Lights Out in your place in fucking Kentucky or wherever the hell he's from," because he's from like the Midwest or something,
Yeah.
and we'll let you do whatever you want. Nope, you got to come here. You got to do, and that's the thing is like, sadly, like when you mentioned the party thing, there are people that I know that I've met that, for lack of a better term, are dog shit when it comes to writing. But they network and they get jobs. They get the $15,000 job. They get the $20,000 job.
God dang.
They network. They're very good with people, and
Yeah.
they can do the bare minimum of what those people want in writing. Granted, these people aren't writing like Manchester by the Sea. They're writing like a few levels above Human Centipede and Sharknado, and like some of them can write pretty good stuff, but essentially, like, I don't know if you've ever seen these sort of big budget web series where it's like soap opera y and they're on YouTube and they're very like the We
Yeah.
Network or whatever.
Yeah.
So I know guys who or people who write for those shows like that, and they get paid pretty damn good money,
Yeah. It's
super good
not.
at networking.
Yeah.
And those and they don't care about being good writers or
Well,
great
it's
writers.
at that point you're making consumable television, consumable film.
You're making McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, and I don't know that our show really caters to that kind of writing. So
Yeah,
if you're that kind of writer, you might, I don't know, maybe stick around, but
yeah.
I think it might be kind of hard for you.
But the interesting thing is, segue to kind of build off that, I have met, they're far and few in between, really, really good writers who've taken jobs like that because they know they can get the network that they need, and they're just like, I'll suck it up for a year.
And
And
that's not bad. That's okay.
yeah,
But if that's your goal is to just make
yeah,
money in writing, you
yeah,
know, again, maybe if you're really good at networking, more power to you. Great, you
Mhm.
know. You're pushing people who are really good at writing and unfortunately have bad people skills, or not even bad people skills, but they're just not not developed to a proficient level, and
Mhm.
they can tell really good stories, and it makes it harder for those kinds of writers to be able to do those things.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I get it. It's consumable TV, and it pays the bills, but I don't know if you're happy with it. Awesome, more power to you.
Yeah.
But
It also does kind of put you in a box too. I mean, those guys are not going to get hired for because there are people like that they write for shows and they would like to do like the artsy or the more like respectable stuff, but
mhm,
if you have that on your resume, I know some of them that don't put it on their portfolio at all. And
yeah,
they'll write the short film for this pretty decent, pretty solid director so that they can have like something serious and something respectable.
hmm
But still it's just like, it's hard to kind of get out of that box. And the other thing, just it just like went in my head and went out. Oh, when we're talking about like how the networking aspect, when a lot of people think networking, they think of it in terms of going to the parties, going to the bars, going to the events, but the networking is also in the actual job itself. Uh, Being a good writer will get you looks, and they can get you the job because the better the writer you are, I need to word this the right way. You don't the film that ends up being made, like financed, produced, and like we're rolling camera. That script is not the script you started off with that was like an A+. It's something
hmm
that you settle with.
yeah,
Like this is a movie. This is what I have to settle with because if you write a script and it's A+, you turn that in, producer comes in and is like, love this. Let's say it's a real producer. We're gonna have fucking Matthew McConaughey, blah 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 blah, right? We're gonna find it. We're gonna do a $30 million film or a $5 million film. They want to do like an indie budget and they want to do some pre-sale shit or whatever.
yeah,
Cool. They're gonna pay you $30,000 for the script. You've already written it. $30,000 check just to start. Okay, cool. All right. So I know it's set in West Texas, but taxes are really bad over there. So in order for us to do it with the budget, we got to move it to like Philadelphia or New Mexico. So we got to do some changing on the script. They just paid you $30,000. Okay, let's do it. All right. Well, now that it's in New Mexico, we set it there. We got some tax breaks and all that. We're gonna get some tax breaks. The scene that you set up here that takes place at Texas Tech doesn't really work, and University of New Mexico is not going to let us film. So we got to figure out something else. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. So that's sort of the process, and that's another networking aspect. Is how do you work that? And the better writer you are, the better you can adapt and still deliver really good shit.
yeah,
And that's sort of like it's like a pop singer. There's pop singers that can just take the template and go, and then there's like those artists that are like the record label sign them. You got to make a pop song, and they make a fucking amazing pop song, even though they
yeah,
do not want to whatsoever, but they know they have to because the studio's making them and all that.
yeah. Or
So
they
it's sort of
redefine what a pop song is.
yeah, it's sort of the same thing. Is you get these notes, and your knee jerk reaction is obviously going to be like, no, like it's not gonna make it as good, and it might not, but if you're really really good and you got your craft down, you'd be like, okay, I can put in a fucking chase scene with cars, but make it really cool.
Yeah,
And again, regardless of how good you do that, when the director comes, the director's going to do their thing with it. Especially if let's say you get like a big director like Ridley Scott, he's going to do whatever the fuck he wants.
all right.
And he's
Yeah,
done that before. Where he's changed so many things, and they may bring on another writer later down the line. And so, a lot of that, how well you deal with that, is part of networking as well. Because if you go through that process and you're just a fucking nightmare and the movie fails, they like nobody's gonna want to work with you.
yeah,
But there's a term in Hollywood where you fail up, you don't fail down. So like once you pass a certain filter, a certain like level, I guess, that even if you work on a movie and you do all that and the movie tanks, if the way you worked with the producer and the executive producer and the director, if they really like you, they'll put you on other stuff. You're not gonna like not have a career after that. And that's a big part of writing is like it's management. It's like how well do I manage personalities? How well do I manage stuff? And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize when they're stepping into the film industry is it's not you just sitting down punching, you know, words onto a page and then it goes off and it becomes this movie and it's just like this very seamless thing. It's a lot of emails, it's a lot of phone calls, it's a lot of Zoom meetings now, and it's a lot of people disagreeing, and it's a lot of management. You have to deal with all these personalities, and the writing process becomes very sterile. And that's sort of a thing that turns off a lot of people is when they actually kind of get their first real like film job and they're just like fuck, this is like there's no creative like arousal that I'm getting from this. It's just all problem solving.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. And that's another that kind of like ties back around to what we say is like that's a really justifiable reason why getting money and getting paid is very critical to you if you want to make a career out of this or even just make an extra income out of this because you are problem solving a lot of things. You are doing laborious work. It's not just this purely creative endeavor. And so, when it comes to having these contracts, whether literally on a page or a contract between verbally or whatever, money has to be a thing that needs to be discussed because at the end of the day, what are you just making this film? Or are we just doing this thing just to like not make money off of it or not even with the hopes of making money off of it?
Hmm.
If it's a short film, that's different. But for the most part, people are, you're going to want to do a feature length screenplay. You're going to want to sell a product. And
Yeah.
so, you have to bring that, you have to talk money, and you have to figure out a way. You have to figure out a way to where you're protected and you're going to get yours. You're going to get your money, whether
Yeah.
it's on the back end, up front, or a combination of all three.
And I think it gives you a new definition for kill your darlings,
Yeah.
where that refers to the things in your script that you don't want to get rid of but you have to. This it applies the same way in that when it comes time to actually produce it, when it comes time to actually film it, everybody who gets their hands on your script is going to think that it should be done a certain way. you
Hmm.
know Everybody's going to have their own suggestions, and if you can work with those suggestions, like you said, creatively, and still be on point and say, like, yeah, I can make that work actually, or yeah, that we can actually write that into the script and find a way to collaborate.
Hmm.
That is going to make you a more successful writer than the writer who says, I hate that idea. Like, no, you're just tearing this apart. Like, I don't, you know what? I don't want any part of it anymore.
Hmm.
The ability to adapt as a writer is an integral part of your success, and that
Hmm.
doesn't just apply to the writing process. That applies to the production process as well. Being able to kill your darlings and say, you know what, yeah, okay, I could see how that could work. Um,
Yeah.
if you want to make money,
Hmm.
and eventually you're going to get to that apex point where you can say, no, it needs to work like this. When
Hmm.
you're that writer,
Hmm.
like, congratulations, kudos
Yeah.
to you. We will all look up to you, and
Yeah.
but until that point, you have to be able to just let some things go and for sure and say, okay, that works.
Yeah. Ego's probably the biggest killer of. It's equally the biggest killer and the biggest elevator in somebody's career because it's like controlling your ego at the right time and knowing when to use your ego is very, very critical.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I'll kind of do like a quick tangent over, or not really a tangent, but if you're like, I'm gonna break it down basically, just kind of going back to how we started this conversation, just break it down to how to protect yourself with writing and getting money. So the first thing is have a contract of some sort, whether it's through email, text message, audio recording, an actual written contract. Misconception is, for one, contracts are just pieces of paper, and it's really just a record of things. What a contract does is it's going to make things easier if you go into some type of legal arbitration or whatever the word is. That's probably not the right word, but legal action.
Yeah.
And that can cut through a lot of the bullshit. If you have a contract, boom, boom, boom. You can still win cases. Like if you don't get paid or you get your shit stolen, you can still win without a contract because, especially technology, data, files, all of that can prove a lot of things.
Hmm.
Somebody says, "Oh, blah blah blah, this and that. It's my script." Okay, well then how come I have the original data from Final Draft or Celtics or whatever?
Yeah.
And
It's
most of the time you're
it's
gonna have
dated too.
emails. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
gonna have emails. You're gonna have some sort of point of contact, original contact of when this person wants you to write. Um, if somebody owes you money and you don't have a contract, if you were able to get it to court, even if there's no like anything written down or whatever, depending on the judge's mood, they could be like, "Oh, this person spent 7 hours, 12 hours a day, once a week to do, over the course of weeks, and you never paid him anything, and you guys had a verbal agreement." If it, you just have to make your case look more believable than the others, and so a judge could say, "Hey, you're going to owe this person $1,500. That seems like a fair price for whatever."
Yeah.
But having a contract is really great. The contract also, you need to have protections in terms of copyrights, timelines, penalties, fees. So they don't pay, if they're going to pay you like in 5 installments or a deposit or pay you at the end, they don't pay it in a certain day, it's a penalty, 10%. And then after another week, it's another 10%. It just keeps going, keeps going. Um, like I said, if they're going to bring in another writer, they have to pay you a fee. We want to bring in this other writer. Okay, it's $150 just to let this other person go and work on my stuff. And you could even set parameters for that. They can only work on one scene. For every scene, you have to pay me $150. It's a little absurd, but it actually protects it because a lot of times they'll just be like, "I'll just have you do it," like because I don't want to.
Yeah.
And so there's that, and then the other thing is too is like if somebody's not paying you, you own the rights until they pay you. If somebody's paying you, there's a thing called transfer of rights. And it's a clause where it basically says, when does the rights actually transfer to the client or the producer or the director, whoever's hiring you? And you got to put in there upon final payment. So people will give you a deposit. You sign a contract, like say that the client will say, "I own the rights." And once you sign that contract, they own the rights, even though you haven't started on the project. So you have to have transfer of rights. And then, so if they decide not to pay you the last thing, it's like you own it until you pay me my last paycheck. Like I own it. The other thing is like uh, basically percentage of sales if they sell it to a production company, because usually they'll buy the rights to it. You get a percentage of that. You get a percentage of production. So if they produce it for $5 million, you usually get anywhere from 1 to 3% of that. You should get percentage of streaming. You should try to fit all these in. You may not get it all, especially if you're really really new
Hmm.
and you have nothing to back that up that you're owed that. But even if they want to say, "Oh, like you only have like one short film or blah blah blah," it's like, well, if you're asking me to paint a house, I'm gonna charge you for it,
Right.
regardless of whether it's my first or 100th house that I painted. And so you may not get everything, but at the very least, it's like you said, one, you're already protecting yourself. Two, it shows people that you're serious. And three, it's going to scare away anybody who's not really serious about it. And, if you reach to the higher levels of like production companies and people with money, probably by then you're going to be a lot more versed and you're going to have an entertainment lawyer and all that. But this is like a really good way to start, especially when you're brand new, to at least be thinking about those things and to at least bring them up in discussion. And you can also, if you're like a little hesitant, you don't necessarily have to put all of that into a contract. You can say, in a contract, you can always have clauses that say upon completion of work, a new contract will be drafted for these other things. If you sell the script, if it goes into streaming platforms,
Yeah.
and you just can say, hey, once we're done with the thing, we can sit down and talk about whatever future financial thing will come from this, if any. But it's a good way to start practicing, good way to protect yourself. And honestly, if for anybody that's new, just try to get whatever money you can in a fair way, in a respectable way that you can, just working on the project, because it is labor work at the end of the day. And don't worry so much about whether the movie will make a bunch of money, and it's most likely won't. 99.9% of stuff doesn't make money. And at the end of the day, when you're done with the project, you just want to move on and go work on the next thing. So if you can make $1,000, $500, $1,500 for a month, 2 months of working on something, cool. You got it done. Boom. Go on to the next project, and just really focus on that. And you know, use a deposit, use payment upon completion of work, use installments. You pay me $100 every couple weeks, and you can set a cap to that. If the person doesn't want to spend more than 1,000, then okay, every couple weeks $100, and then I'll write this much up until you spent all your money. So there's a lot of ways, but again, you have to be creative about it, and it's annoying because you'd rather just sit down and write, and just have the very fantastical romantic thing of like, I'm just sitting in my office writing and I'm just collecting a paycheck and nobody's bothering me. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately,
Not unless you're an
until
artist.
you're like Stephen King.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's a different beast altogether, novel writing and things like that. So those are all really good points, and I think that's an excellent way to close out today's episode. Is just kind of regurgitating those. Is protect yourself. Make sure that you put in those clauses. Make sure that you, like you said, put in the transfer of rights. One, because all of those things get the contract. All of those things are going to be important, so that you can protect yourself. Also, appear like you know what the hell you're talking about, and just in the end, just it's all just good practice, really. So
Yeah, and I guess I'll kind of go on like too much. Like these are much more elongated stories, but
yeah,
I'll simplify them a lot. I mean, I've had situations where I've been in shouting matches on the phone with people, like
yeah,
like you know you owe me money, or this and that, blah blah blah, and you can't. There's nothing they can do to you. I'll tell you that. If nobody paid you anything and whatever, there's nothing they can do to you. There are producers that'll threaten to sue you. They'll be like, I'm gonna ruin your career, blah blah blah. It's like, bitch, you can't even pay me. So who, like, you know what I mean? Like, what power do you have?
yeah,
They'll say all those things to like, scare you or punk you. And the other thing is like, don't ever get in a situation, and it's almost inevitable, especially when you get in the business. I don't know anybody who's been in this business who's made even a little bit of money who hasn't been fucked over.
yeah,
Um, you're going to, and it's also depending how you deal with it. You can take your losses and go. But like, I had a friend who somebody owed him money, and the guy had paid him a little bit, but he had done like 3 months of like really extensive writing. And I should say acquaintance. He's not really a friend. I haven't talked to him in years, but um, and guy owed him money. Texted him, hey man, like, don't basically he was telling him, hey man, let's be real here. Like, pay me what you owe me. Like, it's no big deal. If you can't afford it, pay me half.
yeah,
Let's just be men about this or whatever. And he reached the point where it's like he was like in a bind and he needed money and all that. And with the power of social media, and the guy blocked him and everything.
yeah.
So with the power of social media, he created an account with a friend, used her pictures with her. She helped him with this. So they took pictures and they created an account for like a few weeks and posted pictures and like started adding people on there. and then they reached out to that guy that owed him money. He's thinking it's this chick that's into him, talking for a couple weeks, and sets him up to like go meet for fucking whatever.
So
You see where this is going. He
I,
goes to meet
I
this
know,
girl.
I think I remember this story. No, I never heard this part of it though. So,
I think I've told very, very like very watered down versions. Goes to think he's meeting this chick. Fucking the acquaintance goes. It's like, hey man, you owe me fucking money. So how do you want to do this? And then it exchanged some words, and the guy gave him some money. I think I don't know if he like Venmoed him or whatever, but
damn,
he paid him. It was like
Venmo wasn't a
150
thing back
bucks. Yeah, it wasn't any, but it was like the principal. And then it's just sort of like that just sets the tone. Like you're not gonna fuck with me, kind of thing.
then. Yeah.
There,
Um,
it's that's not the only situation I've heard a lot of similar stories of people chasing people down for money, like trying to track them, and
yeah.
so
Yeah. That's good. That's good. That's a good one. I
yeah.
like that. Oh man. Um, that's crazy. Well, I'm glad that we got to start off on this. Like you, I feel like this could be a discussion that takes up several episodes for sure. Because
Yeah.
just as we were talking, I was spurring up more ideas, like some things that we didn't get to. Like, what do you do whenever you do make that paycheck? That was something that we kind of talked about at the beginning, and I feel like that's something that we can talk about in a later episode. Is do you put it away for a rainy day? Do you put it into something that you want to do? What do you do with that money, and how does it feel? And then of course there's some other topics as well, like what you were talking about there at the end, just as far as kind of getting screwed over and how does that feel, and how do you dig yourself out of that hole? You know,
Hmm.
so I'm excited to get to kind of get into this aspect of it, the business
Yeah.
aspect of it. So,
I think this could be like part one.
oh, for
Part
sure,
one of this. Yeah, because
for sure.
there's also, as I was talking, it was like I was kind of like going a little bit over, like rambling a bit, because it was like just so many things were like, I was like,
Yeah.
fuck, I didn't, there's this I could cover, and there's this I can cover. And I know, like with contracts, I mean, I touched barely like the tip of the iceberg of like all the stuff that needs to go in contracts and that people need to be
Yes.
aware of. And
We definitely
that's like
need
a
to make
whole college course in and of itself. So,
yeah, yeah,
but yeah, so yeah, I definitely some future episodes we can touch on this again, and especially people like ask questions, you know, and those can be topics on the next time we bring this up, maybe 2 or 3 episodes down the line from here.
for sure, for sure. Awesome. Well, all right, guys. I think that is all the time that we have for today. Thanks for sticking around and watching. For those of you who are catching this on Monday, whenever it goes up on YouTube, thanks for watching. Feel free to come in and check us out every Friday night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will go live. And when we do go live, the chat is open and you are welcome to ask questions. And at the end of the episode, we will definitely get to those questions. So if you have anything that you want to talk about or discuss with, we will try our best to answer those for you at the end of the episodes. So thanks everybody for hanging around, and I guess we will see you next Friday.